tricks and hacks and tips to make your teaching life a lot easier, I got you covered. Hey, my name is Gabriel Vila, and in this video, I'm going to go through so many different tips that you can apply to your classroom to hopefully make your teaching life easier. So I have this YouTube channel, and once I post these shorts, and I have something called Expert Teacher Tips. I'm just going to go through those. Now, since this is live, let me just go ahead and put a poll in here real fast. That way, if anybody has a question, they're more than welcome to answer it here. But let me just put that there for you. All right, so let's get to this. Here we go. So let me just kind of go through these tips, so one by one, and once again, hopefully you can find some of these helpful. So here's our first tip that I want to cover is that have students do some of your work. And that now you want them to do work in the class, obviously, right? You want them to do work that's a given. But if you can have students do some of the work in your class to lessen that workload you have, man, I'm telling you, if you can create systems like that, you're going to enjoy your teaching career so much more. I'll give you examples of something I do in my class. For a while there, I was getting bogged down with grading. And if you're a teacher, you know how that goes, man. You got your lesson planning going on. You got all this other stuff you got to do. And then if you add grading on top of that, woo, that is the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? And so I came up with this system for grading. And this is how it works. Um, let's say we're doing notes, for example, in my class. At the beginning of the year, I teach students how I'm going to grade the notes. I tell them how I'm going to grade the notes. It's basically 1 point per note that they get. And so the magic number is one. And then when we're done with those and we're done with the notes, at the very end, they grade their own paper. So think about this. If I did not have this in play and I was grading notes, and I would grade notes every day, that is a total of 5 classes, 30 kids in each class. That's 150 pieces of paper I would have to grade on a daily basis. That's like 2 hours worth of grading. You can see how that would be quickly become very overwhelming. I just want to be able to maintain that, right? And so by students grading their own paper, first of all, that takes the burden off me. So no longer have to grade 150 pieces of paper. Students already did all the grading. And then I just have to put the scores in the grade book. But I even took it another step further. What I did is I have, so for example, my first period class, we'll say we do notes, right? And they do their own grading. And then when that grading is done, when they're done grading their paper, they turn it in. Then the next period comes. And when the next period comes, I have a dependable, a student I know I can trust, right? A good student. I say, hey, instead of taking the notes today, would you want to grade papers? And of course, almost everybody says, yeah, right? I mean, a free class period and no stress taking notes. And I give them a copy of notes and everything works out good. It's a win-win situation. And so they're going to grade the papers. So they grade the papers of the previous class. And so when they're done, and what they do is I have them write down what the student marked their score as, and I have them recount the points, and then they mark down what they came up with. And then when it comes time for me to actually put the grades in the grade book, I don't have to go through each piece of paper. They already wrote down those scores on a grade sheet. I have that printed out for them already. And so literally, I just basically key in the scores. I can grade or I can put in the scores for all 5 periods in about 5 minutes. So that means grading that would have took me 2 hours to do, I can complete in 5 minutes. And that is just by me shifting the workload of what I would do up to the students. Now, that's just one example. Another example might be passing back papers, right? Instead of, and I do this in my class as well, instead of me passing back papers, which can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I have a student pass back papers. Passing out papers, a student might do that. Writing on the board, an agenda or something like that, I have a student. So any work that you can have students do, I recommend you give them that responsibility. First of all, it helps you out. It helps them out, teach them that responsibility part of it as well. And they start taking ownership more of the class. So once again, anytime you can shift the burden of any kind of workload from yourself to the students, do it. And you're going to find yourself much happier at the end of the day. So that was the first step. Tip number 2. Once again, if you're joining this and you're live and you want to ask any questions, feel free to do that. But here we are. Question number 2, or actually tip number 2, set clear boundaries. Set clear boundaries. So in your classroom, I'm going to be teaching a class. I call this Classroom Management 101, Classroom Management 101. And I have a course on classroom management. And the very first video, the very first assignment worksheet that I have teachers do is a reflection of things they want in their class. So, for example, what I would ask teachers to do is I want you to understand, because we all want, as teachers, we all want good classes. As teachers, we all want classes in which, you know, that we enjoy. The students are there, students are being productive, participation, running smoothly, no behavior problems. We all want these things as teachers. But what does that really mean for your class? Because each teacher is different, right? I call it the threshold. My boundary is different than someone else's boundary. And so, as teachers, you really have to hone in, be very specific what you're looking for in your class. Meaning, for example, when students walk into the class, how do you want students to walk in? What do you want students to do the moment they walk in? Do you really want them to start the moment they enter the class, or do you want to start a minute or two later? What is acceptable to you? You have to create in your mind these clear boundaries, these clear expectations, these clear. Um, you have to be totally aware of what you want, because if you're not, then what's going to happen? Things are going to go crazy. But once you have this clear expectations, you set that boundary in your class. And once you set that boundary in your class, here's the important part of it. You got to enforce that boundary. You got to enforce that. You got to make sure not only do students know what that boundary is, but you also have to make sure that you have students adhere to it. And the moment that a student crosses that line, crosses that boundary, you're on topic. Not to punish, not to be mean, but to make them aware, hey, this is the boundary you have. You crossed it. Maybe here are some consequences. This is what you need to do next time. But if you don't have those clear boundaries in your mind, and as a teacher, you got to do that. If you don't exactly know what you're looking for, then you're going to accept everything. And then that is when you're going to have problems. And you know that when you go into classes, you feel the difference from class to class. So on the course I teach, Classroom Management 101, that is the first thing we do is we go through a litmus of all different things. What do you want students to do the moment they walk in? How do you want students to get your attention? What do you expect students' behavior to be as this? And we just go through everything. So I recommend you do the same exact thing. And by the way, if you want a copy of that worksheet that I give to teachers to kind of go through, find me email. I think it's going to be somewhere on my YouTube channel. Email me. I'd be more happy to send you a copy of that as well. So tip number two. Here we go. Tip number three. Tip number three. Oh, I heard this before as an early teacher. It didn't sound right at first, but I understand it now. They said the greatest teachers are the greatest thieves. Right? It doesn't sound too good, right? Don't be stealing. But and honestly, as teachers, there's so much we can learn from other teachers. I was at a meeting here recently, one of our leadership meetings at my school, and someone said, as I said, the answers are in the room, and that is so true. The answers are in the. I've been doing this teaching thing for 20 years, and I kind of have a routine and flow down. But I'm amazed if I ever go into another class or if I get a chance to really sit down with a teacher and talk to them about what to do, I learn something from them because we're all doing something different. We all do things and we all kind of want the same thing, but how we get to that could be different. And so I'll give you an example. I have this one teacher, and she's been teaching about 20 years as well, and I'm amazed by what she does in her class. So I went to her class to observe it one time, and she had direction. She the students were taking notes. They were taking notes for about 5 minutes, I think about 5 minutes, and then she stopped. She, all right, guys, here's what I want you to do. I want you to, and she posed a question. I think she was teaching like about Charlemagne or something like that, and she posed a question about Charlemagne. What do you think something was? And students had to answer their questions in their notes, right? So they answered the question in notes. Then and she says, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and share that with your partner. And she had students in basically in rows, but they were in pairs. So in rows, but they were in pairs. And she said, okay, share with your partner. And so the students, and she was on it. She said, you got 1 minute, go. And then the students were sharing with each other for about 1 minute their answers and everything else. And she's all right, everybody up here, and they all stopped working. It was like magic she was doing. It was beautiful. And she goes, all right, now we're gonna work on activity. Now I want you to get into your groups. And this is the part that blew me away. She said, "You got 1 minute, go." And then what happened is they said they're in pairs, right? In rows. The two people in the front turned their desks around and went from pairs to fours to a group just like that. And within 1 minute, everybody was in the group working. Now she front loaded this like crazy. At the beginning of the year, she went through all this and she just really made sure students knew the routine and everything else. So what I'm saying. What was he got? Matt. Hey Matt, how you doing, sir? Just saw that. Again, I'm getting old. I have to wear my glasses, by the way. I'm sorry about that, Matt. Welcome. Hello, Matt. How you doing, sir? Hope you're having a good day. I'm a teacher. I'm on break right now. This is wonderful. Each day is wonderful right now. And so I was mentioning about this teacher. She boom, there we go. They're in groups now, and it, it was beautiful. And I saw that, and I've been doing 20 years, and I thought I had things down pretty well, and I was happy with everything. But the way she made that happen, I thought, man, I gotta learn how to do that. I gotta learn how to do that. And so I stole that idea from her. So that's one thing I took away from her class. But there's everything. I mean, just the way teachers interact with students, just some of the routines they have, the procedures, the way they deal with things, whatever it is, do not be afraid to steal that from other teachers in a good way, of course, because man, the answer is in the room, and there are some incredible teachers out there that we all can learn from. So don't be afraid to steal great ideas. Here we go. Next one. Oh, here we go. Hold on to the good moments in your classroom. Hold on to it, the good moments. So I'm gonna lay this out for you. Here's some honest truth. Teaching is hard work. If you're a brand new teacher, I'm gonna hopefully I don't burst your bubble here. There are gonna be some dark days. There are gonna be some rough days. You're gonna have interaction with students that are just going to rattle your cage. And you're going to question, if you're a brand new teacher, you're going to question, should I really be doing this job? Is this job the right job for me? This wasn't what I was thinking it was going to be. Because when I first started teaching 20 years ago, I had this image of what it's going to be. I had this image that I was going to go in a classroom, I was going to have this great lesson. Kids were going to be interacting with, the kids were going to be all excited, and it was going to be the best experience like you would see on a TV show. And that was so far from the truth. It did not happen that way. And of course, over the years, I learned it doesn't happen that way. But there are some real magical moments in your class. There are some really, you, you're going to have some experiences that are going to touch your heart. You're going to have some experiences that are just going to make your day, make your year, and make your career, right? And so anytime you come across something good like that, you want to make at least make a mental note of it. If you have some sort of diary reflection or something, write it down. Do something to retain that. uh, I listened to David Goggins. I'm not sure if you know who he is. He's known as the toughest man in the world, and he wrote a book called, I think it's called "Can't Hurt Me." But he says he has something called the cookie jar. Is what he has. The cookie jar for David Goggins is that anytime he accomplishes something, he makes a mental note of it and puts it in his cookie jar, right? And then anytime he's up to some obstacles and he's having a hard time, he's like, I don't know if I could really make it through this run. I don't know if I really do this. He'll dig into his cookie jar and remember of all the things he's accomplished, all the things he's done, all the times he hit that wall and kept going forward. And that gives him the extra motivation. You need to have a cookie jar when it comes to students. You need to have at least a mental thing of some great memories, some great experiences you had. So that way, when hard times come, you can dive into that cookie jar. So I'm going to give you just a couple of my cookie jar moments here, right? These are just things at the top of my head. I'm going to just start right with last year. Uh, One student I had last year, um, it was every day he came in. We did that thing from Big Hero 5. It's like the fa la 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 thing, right? So small, right? The fa la 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 thing. But I can tell you, I look forward to that every single day. He would come in, we'd do that, and every time we leave, we would do that. That's all. That's it, right? Nothing big. But I that fed my cookie jar. That was something I'm going to put in my cookie jar. And I'm sure I'll remember from years and years to come. Something I look forward to. Last year, there's a student in my class that we played chess. Um, and the story goes like this. He said, Mr. Beal, we had some free time in class or something going on. He said, hey, you want to play some chess? I'm like, sure, I was pretty good chess in the day, the game of chess, no problem. I said, sure, let's go ahead. So I was, putting some gradient or something. I was playing chess kind of on the side, on the computer. And before I know it, he beat me. Like, whoa, wait a second. I didn't see that coming at all. So I jumped to a rematch and he beat me again. I'm like, whoa, wait a second, something's going on here. And so for the next month or two and three of the school year, I kept playing chess online and getting better. And so eventually we played some more matches, and I think overall I won three, he won two. So I came out as the winner on this chess game. But that is a cookie jar moment. I'm gonna hold on to it for a long time. Some other things, I've been invited to students' graduation. Oh man! So I teach eighth grade, and when students graduate in 12th grade, I mean, think about it, from eighth to 12th grade. That's 4 years. They still remembered my class, and they actually had a chance to invite any teacher to their graduation. They chose me. Whew, how powerful is that, right? I mean, so many times we question our ability as teachers. So many times we question, are we really making a difference? And to have a student remember 4 years later and ask you, invite you to the graduation, oh man, that is incredible. Another student, she was actually one of my home hospital students, meaning she couldn't go to school. There was a medical condition. She couldn't make it to school. And since she couldn't make it to school, I actually went to her house to teach her. Right. And the weird thing about it is, uh, every time I saw her, she was always upbeat, and she never really seemed that sick or that ill, right? But there's some serious medical conditions going in there. And one day she mentioned, I think I want to become an archaeologist. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Become an archaeologist. I think it'd be incredible doing that. And for her, she wasn't, because of the medical condition, she didn't really think she could do that. Because of medical conditions and everything else, she just thought that was a limitation she had. But I didn't see that limitation in her, because I just didn't. Because what I saw was every time I went there, just how awesome and how incredible of a student she was and a person she was. And then later on to find out, she starts going to college, and we were corresponding via email. She's going to college, and then get this, she's studying to become an archaeologist. And one time she sent me an email. She says, "Hey, and I'm studying to become an archaeologist, and I'm actually on a dig site. Right, one of my professors took me to a dig site down in Mexico." I'm like, no way. That's like my dream, right? Oh my gosh, really? A dig site in Mexico? And she went on to tell the story of how she's at the dig site and she's helping, and she just like you would see in the movies, right? There's a little brush and everything. She uncovers a toy, and as she uncovers the toy, it's an ancient Aztec toy. And she was voicing in this email, she goes, I never, to hold something in your hand that the last person held it 1,000 years ago, right? To hold this little artifact in your hand that the last person touched us was somebody who lived 1,000 years ago, and then you are now touching it once again. She says that was like a dream. And I could not believe it. And here's the beautiful thing about it. She said, thank you for giving me the encouragement. What? Me? She's the one who did all the work. She was the student, the incredible person, the everything else. But yeah, she was thanking me. And it is such a humbling thing. Because all I know is I'm just doing the best I can. And there's so many times I doubt whether or not I'm making a difference. But to get emails like that and correspond like that, man, that is a cookie jar moment. And one more cookie jar moment here. There's so many. There's so many. I'm leaving a gazillion of them out here, but one last one here. When I was teaching at the high school, I had a student. His name was William Sweezy. Was his name William Sweezy? He goes by Sweezy, and he came into my class one time. I say, "Hey, Will, how's it going?" And his response was zesty. I'm like, what? Zesty? What is it? He goes, like good, full of life and everything else, right? This was like maybe like 10 years ago, right? Full of life, zesty and everything else. And Will Sweezy is a big guy. He's on a football team. He's Samoan. I mean, he was bigger than I am. This guy was huge. And this is in high school. and he's zesty, right? And he's one of those guys that when you walk into the room, he has that presence, not a mean presence or and like, but a presence that everybody kind of wants to be around. You know, those people that are just charismatic. You know, what I'm trying to say charismatic that way, right? And so here's Sweezy coming in, zesty and everything else. But through that year, for some reason, that stuck in my head that word, and hence when I created my YouTube channel, my original name of the YouTube channel was Professor Zest, right? I got that from Sweezy. But the story unfolds. So years pass. He's out of the no longer in high school, and everything else. And then I'm at my kid's school one day, and from behind comes this big guy, picks me up, and lifts me up like that, right? I'm like, oh my gosh! I turn around and there's Sweezy. I'm like, hey, Sweezy, what? And so it's weird that a student now is in a total adult, right? And we start talking. It's weird how you change the levels from a student teacher relationship to just a person that man relationship, right? And and everything else. And so one more layer to this story. At my school, I was thinking of different ways in which we can have incentives. I teach a middle school now. Different ways to have incentives for the students, right? Different things to encourage students to do well. And I thought, hey, be awesome would be if we gave them like a little concert, right? And I thought, who could come in perform at our school? And Sweezy came to mind because Sweezy right now is basically trying to get into the rap scene and everything else. He's a Christian rapper. It's pretty interesting stuff. So hey, if you want to check it out, look up Sweezy. I think is the name on the YouTube channel. I think it might be called Sweezy or Will Sweezy or something like that. One of his songs called Calabama. I'm sure you'll be able to search it and find it. But so I thought, man, how awesome would that be to see if I could get Sweezy to perform at our middle school because he went to our middle school for a little bit and the high school in our district, and so he's in the area, and I texted him and I say, hey, Sweezy, that's something you think be interested in. And he's all in on it. He said, man, I've been praying about this. I've been thinking about this. And he says, I was praying to God, say, hey, I want to get back to community. And bam, here you go. Here's the opportunity to get back to community. And he said, yeah. So this might be possible in my school. These are all cookie jar moments. So when you're a teacher and things are going on, and a lot of times all we focus on is the bad things, because that's just human nature, right? To always be worried about what is going on, what is wrong, and everything else. But I promise you, even if you're not thinking you're making a difference, there is some student in your class that you're making a difference with. So always keep that in mind and just focus on those good moments. That way, when the rough times come, you have something to dig into to keep you going. All right, cookie jar. And that was a long explanation, wasn't it? Here we go. Let's keep going. Next teacher tip. Oh, all right. Oh, here we go. Don't be afraid to say you're sorry. Don't be afraid to say you're sorry. This is a hard one, right? I mean, just as humans as we are, just in normal relationships outside of the classroom, it's hard to say we're sorry. It's hard to admit that. It just is, for whatever reason. And so that's something I've had to learn throughout the years is how to say I'm sorry. Genuinely say I'm sorry, right? And that because it causes a lot of reflection. It causes a, the saying goes like this: in any situation that goes on, you got to own your part, whatever that might be. Even if the person is the wrong and you see they did wrong things, I guarantee there's something that you done that you could have done differently and better, and you got to own that. And if you own that, then you can really come to the table with the true, genuine, I'm sorry. So if you put that into the classroom, same thing. Because in the classroom, there's you. I teach secondary. I have 5 classes, and there's 30 kids in each class. So that is a total of 150 students. That's 150 different relationships that a teacher trying to navigate, right? And each one of those is a unique in their own way. But just like any relationship you have, if you're trying to build that trust, you're trying to build something in there. Um, there might be times, a period of times where there's a mistake is being made. And if I make a mistake dealing with a student, I need to own it. I have to, because if I do not own it, that relationship I have with the student is going to be severed, and it could maybe never be fixed. And then without it being fixed, then you kind of run all sorts of problems in your classroom. So I'll give you an example of what happened. And True story here. There were these two girls. This happened several years ago. There was these two girls in my class, and we're taking a test, and they sit right next to each other. They're kind of friends. They sit next to each other, and I thought one of them was kind of looking over to the other one's paper, and or back. Ready for this? I'm gonna outdate myself here. We had scantrons. You probably most people don't even know what that is, right? A scantron is a paper about so big where you bubble in your answers. So that's what a scantron is. So the students were taking a test and writing their answers on a scantron. God, I'm so old, man. I can't believe I'm saying this. Write their answers on a scantron. And then I saw one girl keep looking over at the other girl's paper, or scantron, and I swear she was copying her. I didn't know for sure, but I swear. And so when they turn all the things in, I look at their scantrons, and they are pretty much identical. Now that is always a clue, right? If the identical answers, and they sit right next to each other, that's really suspicious. And so I basically had a conversation with them. Said, "Hey, I don't want to say anything, but I noticed that you guys' answers are almost identical. Did you copy from each other?" And the thing is, these students were good students. They really were good. I mean, they always been respectful, polite, nice. I mean, they were always involved. And they were good students. But I called them out on it. I said, "Hey, did you guys copy from each other?" They're like, they like kind of like, no. Why would you even say that? I said, you guys sit right next to each other. The answers are almost identical. Looking like you guys copied. But like, no, we didn't do it. We didn't do it. I said, all right, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna have you retake the test. Retake the test. I'm gonna have you separate. Retake the test. Okay, and we'll see. And the girls retook the test away from it. They're separate from each other. They retook. This happened like a day or two afterwards as well. Um, and they retook it, and they both got pretty much the same answers again. And I realized they didn't copy each other. They just did it. And that was the proof in it. And that was hard because I broke that trust with them because they were good students. I doubted them. I basically called them out when I was wrong. And by me doing that, it kind of broke that trust, that relationship. And it was tough. And so afterwards, I really thought, man, I can play this two ways. I can say, all right, guys, fine, whatever, we'll get the score you have, or hey, make sure you don't cheat. But I realized I made a mistake, and I remember coming to them and say, hey, that that's me. I'm sorry. I thought you cheated, and I was 100% wrong. I'm so sorry. Um, will you forgive me? And they were like, yeah, yeah, we'll go ahead and forgive you, no problem. But because of that, if I didn't apologize, there's a good chance that relationship would have been severed forever. And who knows what kind of behaviors or problems would have arose from that. And then also in my class, by the way, that's one thing I tell my students all the time. That's actually the honest truth. I want all my students to be successful. I would love them all to have great grades. But what's more important to me than the grade is their character. And I actually feel this way about my own kids as well. They're all wonderful kids. They all do really good in school and everything else. But I hope they understand. I always try to convey to them what I value in my kids more than the grades they earn and all that is who they are as people. And my kids are some awesome people. Well, I guess I'm a father. I'm going to say that right. But in all honesty, they really are some awesome, awesome young adults. And so I tell that to my students, say, hey, what's more important to me is your character than anything else. And so there was a whole bunch every year. There's a student or two that will cheat, right? And once again, I can make the decision: do I call them out or do I not call them out? Do I really think they cheated? If I really say they cheated, and I have a talk with them, usually what comes out is they cheated. And what I convey to them is, hey, you know what? I understand you cheated. I can't give you credit for this. You're gonna get a zero. But in all honesty, what bothers me more than that is that trust. Because once you break that trust, this is any relationship. I remember I had a pastor one time talking about. Said there's this trust that he kind of drew a graph. He said it kind of goes like this, right? And the longer you're with somebody, the more you spend time with somebody and everything else, that trust builds. But once that trust is broken, it just takes a dip down, and it can never get back to where it was before. It just never can get to where it could have been before. And it takes a long time to build that trust up again. And so I can be that to my students. I say, hey, more than anything else, is that trust that was broken. That is what I have a hard time getting over. So if you ever do make a mistake in your class and you accuse student of something, or if you ever need to apologize to it, don't be afraid to do it. It's the right thing to do. And of course, that probably applies to outside of the classroom as well. But that was the next tip. Let's keep going. Here we go. Uh, Next one. Here we go. Look at my paper. Simplify your substitute lesson plans. Oh, so I have this YouTube channel, right? And a lot of times I'll have teachers reach out to me, and sometimes I have substitutes reach out to me, either asking for what I might do or some recommendations, this and that. But almost all the substitutes I talk to, the feeling I get from most of them is this: that and I know this because I've never actually been a substitute, but I've covered plenty of classes. Here I am, a teacher. I'm a 20-year teacher. I'm a veteran teacher, right? I mean, a long time. I had this manager thing down pretty well. But even if I go into a class that's not mine, the fact that it's not my class and I go into it, immediately students are kind of testing the boundaries, right? Immediately you're feeling the kind of loss of control there somewhat, and you have to be right on top of it, right? It's hard for me to go into another class. So as a substitute, that has to be it's such a hard experience. Personally, I believe the hardest job is a substitute teacher, because you're coming to if a classroom is dysfunctional to begin with, you're coming to somebody else's mess, right? And so you got to try to deal with that someone else's mess, and that's extremely hard to do. And so for me, what I do in my class is my lesson plan for my substitute is as easy as can be. I don't want it's hard enough for a veteran teacher to carry out an effective lesson, let alone having somebody come in that's not their own class. If I expect them to carry out the lesson, that's just an unreasonable expectation. And that's wrong. Um, what I expect a substitute to do in my class is to monitor the class. I just want them to be there to make sure nothing crazy happens. That's it. I don't want them to carry out, lessons. I don't expect them to teach something. I don't expect them to do all, connect. I just want them to be in the classroom and make sure nothing crazy happens. Any more expectations of that I think are unrealistic and unfair to substitutes, right? And so, for if you have to create a lesson for a substitute, here are some key things you want to do. Number one is give them a seating chart. Oh my God, the seating chart is key to having your class to begin with. But for substitutes, you got to give them a seating chart, because if not, they don't know who's who. And without the accountability, student behavior could be way off the charts. So make sure you leave a good seating chart for your substitute, right, or your guest teacher. Then the next thing you do is, as far as lessons go, you want to make sure the lesson is as simple as possible. Make sure it is easy to implement. For me, and what I think is best, is I just have a video and questions. So if a substitute comes in my class, I have very, very, very specific directions. I tell them exactly what they need to do. I say, please take roll. Here's the seating chart. Then all you got to do is hit play on the video and pass out the worksheet. That is it. And then the job they have to do the rest of the time is just walk the class, monitor it, and just make sure nothing goes crazy. That is what I expect my substitute teacher to do. And I believe that's what anybody should expect a substitute teacher to do. Make your lessons as simple as possible, because if you're expecting to do all the magic in the world that you do, that is just unfair to them. So simplify your lesson plans as much as you can. There we go. Um, Next one, have something for students to do the moment they walk into the class. So, as teachers, uh, in real estate, there's a term. It's called location, 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 right? The better the location, the more valuable the property is. For teachers, the saying should be routines, routines, routines. The better your routines are, the more effective your classroom is going to be. And you need to have routines down solid in your class. I spend, no joke here, I spend probably I know the the first week for sure, I go over routines. But in all honesty, the first really 3 weeks of my school year, I'm just developing and honing in on those routines. So the students have it down for sure. So you want to make sure you have routines now. And I believe probably the most important routine to have in your class is the I call it warm up or something for students to do the moment they walk in, because that's just like the first week, 2, 3 weeks of your school year will set the stage for the rest of your year. The first few minutes in your class will set the stage for the rest of that class period. So if students come in and they are chaotic and they bring in all this energy and disruptive energy, and there's no set routine or patterns, and things are just chaotic the moment they walk into the classroom, that is how your entire period is going to be. And you don't want that. You don't want that. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you have routines all throughout your class, but definitely make sure you got a routine for their first walk in. So once again, I call this my warm up routine. Some people call it bell work, beginning of class. Doesn't make a difference what you want to call it, but just make sure you have something in place. So here's what my routine is the moment the bell rings. So it goes like, in fact, it actually happens before they even get to class. So let's say period one. Period one is gonna the bell's gonna ring for dismissal in 1 minute. What I do the minute before dismissal is I will go prop my door open with like one of those little wedgies, right? And so when the dismissal bell rings, then they're able to go. All right, I'll get more into it a little later. I have to wrap this up real fast, but hey, stay tuned for other ones.